I will not go gentle into that good night. That is the theme of today's episode, and not just talking about this channel, but I'm talking about other channels that we follow and just so happens to be censored. For example, Luke Rudkowski of We're a Change, who just courageously went to the Epstein Island recently. Press for Truth with Dan Dix, who was demonetized the moment they went to Bilderberg and confronted the head of Google. We respect Democratic candidates like Tulsi Gabbard, who seems to be echoing different facts or tidbits about Hillary Clinton that we've been discussing since the very beginning.
Back at her, boy. You called her the queen of warmongers.
You doubled down, unfortunately, you doubled down on the baseless accusations that she made that strikes at the core of who I am. I'm a soldier.
Jimmy Dore, who I believe to be one of the most honest men on the internet right now. And, you know, I gotta admit, I also kind of admire Sticks, Hex, and Hammer 666. Now, what is common about all these channels or Democratic candidate talking about Tulsi? These are people who generally are after the truth. And they oftentimes risk getting demonetized. They risk their monetary capacity, as well as risking their own lives. For example, going to the private property of Epstein's Island. Luke Rudkowski also went to Hong Kong and had, I believe in one of the videos, had one of the Chinese officers pointing directly at him with rubber bullets going right by his head. And these are individuals who are taking risks to bring the truth to the people. And what's so amazing to me as in terms of this climate and what's happening is that I don't see this as a partisan issue, a right or left issue. I see this as a truth-seeking issue, or I'm gonna just bend down to the establishment issue. For example, I believe in many cases, especially when it comes to transparency, Tulsi Gabbard might be more similar to Donald Trump, for example, than Mitt Romney is to Donald Trump, as Tulsi Gabbard is more similar to Donald Trump than she is to perhaps Biden. Because these are people, because Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump are individuals who are not necessarily bending down to the establishment, though Donald Trump does come from a rich background and many consider him to be kind of a hardhead asshole in some ways. What he is doing for this country is so absolutely necessary, in my opinion, in this kind of anti-establishment, kind of confronting even the intelligence agencies, which might have, you know, well, we know for certain that they did have a say in stopping the UFO files, because we went to the CIA files and found a declassified file, because it had been over 50 years, related to how the CIA had concertedly gotten themselves involved in the scientific investigation in 1953 called the Robertson's Panel, that was a reaction to the mass sightings over the White House in 1952. And so I know, having read this document, which I shared on YouTube and it was deleted within a few hours, that for certain the CIA has had a say in trying to stop UFO knowledge. But, you know, just to kind of rehash, it's been a while. It's been like 2 months since I've talked to you guys. I've had a full-time job, but a lot has happened in between that time. And let me tell you, I'm going to start pumping episode after episode after episode, because there's so much to talk about right now. For example, if you saw the recent Jimmy Dore episode where he kind of unveiled Hillary Clinton's corruption with Russia and how she uses the media to literally blame the very thing that she does on her opponent. It's like one of those like Machiavellian tricks. I think Hitler also played that trick. But, you know, it just happened that my wife and I attended the very episode which he discussed all this, which is the very topic that we discussed on Second Earth News right before we were censored from 12,000 views to 200 views.
Said they do all these deals, they get all this money into their foundation. They got $142 million over that Uranium One thing, and people go, "Oh, that's been debunked." It hasn't been debunked. That's fucking corruption of the highest order.
Josh Schwerin said the emails released are a political attack on the Clintons. Would you want to cry about it? Or should we just blame the Russians again? Because let's not forget that you, Hillary, did sign off to give away 1/5 of the US's stockpile uranium reserves to Putin while Bill was making millions giving speeches in Russia. So yes, let's not forget about the Russians.
Lack was joined at the hip with the Hillary Clinton campaign, and they had him fired. Watch.
Now, let me give you the opinion. I think the Clintons were connected to Andy Lack, connected at the hip.
The head of NBC News connected at the hip with the Clintons.
I think that they didn't want anybody in their prime time or anywhere in their lineup supporting Bernie Sanders. I think that they were in the tank for Hillary Clinton, and I think it was managed, and 45 days later I was out at MSNBC.
Guarantee you the execs of CNN wanted the pundits of CNN to direct the conversation away from Bernie. And you know how I know this? Because Time Warner, who is partners company with CNN, actually gave money to Hillary Clinton. Everything we said back then that didn't have a lot of backing, for example, Bill Clinton going to the Jeffrey Epstein Island, we were talking about this in 2016, all of that stuff was almost in a way kind of backed up in the end as Time started to unveil some of these truths or some of these allegations that then became verified. Now, in this Jimmy Dore show, what was so impressive is that he literally talked about almost every topic that we had discussed on Second Earth News right before we were censored. And we even got a selfie with him, which was really cool. He was really nice about it. His wife, Steph, was really cool as well. And the point I'm trying to make is channel is getting verified over and over again. And I'm not saying this for egotistical reason. I'm saying this to protect myself, because we were highlighted in Russian newspapers when we talked about the Hillary Clinton corruption. We did break a story that Lee Camp then took to the Redacted Tonight, and it was then later rebroadcasted by RT News regarding a Stanford study that seemed to indicate that Hillary Clinton had cheated some of the states that were electronically balloted only. This was a statistical analysis. It had like a 1 in 10,000 chance that she did not cheat. So that story broke through to the Russian outlets. But was I ever paid by the Russians? Have I ever been contacted by the Russians? Absolutely not. I don't think I've even met a Russian outside of any friends I've met in LA, perhaps. The point I'm trying to make is that there is an information warfare where these channels that are telling the truth, Luke Rudolsky, Stick, Saxon Hammer, all these channels, Tim Pool, I forgot to say Tim Pool, all these channels that are being throttled by Google, this is, guys, I need to talk about this. I need to talk about the censorship, because there is an information warfare, as you saw with the New York Times lately, as you're witnessing with all kinds of different news organizations that are suddenly blatantly lying to you, like ABC just did regarding the Epstein case, where ABC kind of covered up this story for 3 years, and then even in kind of revealing that they had covered up the story, they were still lying. And if that wasn't enough, I mean, when I was watching the Jimmy Dore show, and I highly recommend this episode so you can see what we talked about in Second Earth News and how this is coming up to front, what really impressed me about that episode are these unbelievable coincidences that have been happening. For example, Jimmy Dore, and I'm talking about in the very episode that me and my wife attended, he gives a Tulsi Gabbard tweet where she's going after Hillary Clinton for being a warmonger, and she literally uses the exact metaphor, which is behind the curtains, Wizard of Oz.
Tulsi said, "Did you see this?" She goes, "Great. Thank you, Hillary Clinton. You, the queen of warmongers, embodiment of corruption, and the personification of the rot that has sickened the Democratic Party for so long, have finally come out from behind the curtain."
Presume to criticize the great Oz?
Which is the metaphor that we created to describe Hillary Clinton way back in 2016. We called her the Wickedy Witch of the West. If this was the Wizard of Oz, then Hillary is the Wicked Witch of the West. It's not just because she laughs like the witch, but if you remember in the Wizard of Oz, the witch wishes to obtain the shoes to increase her power. And one of her characteristics is that most of her powers resides in the creatures that she controls. Example, the pack of wolves, the swarm of bees, flocks of crows, the Winkies, and an army of winged monkeys. Not to mention the poppies, which will draw you to interminable sleep. Thank you, rigged press. So these are all things that have just come out just in the last few months. And I'm not saying this in an egotistical way. I'm saying this in a way to protect myself. Look, I'm just going to say right now, Den Dix has just reported that DARPA has created an artificial intelligence program that is now going to weed out fake news. So now I feel it's my duty to tell you guys what we got correct to see whether there's any way to combat this algorithm, whether there's a way to say, hey, we actually were right about this, 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 and this. It might have taken years to figure it out, but it's true. You know, I mean, I think our second episode, we made an episode about Christopher Mellon, who ended up being one of the 4 members of To the Stars Academy that revealed the gunfighter footage, the UFO tic-tac-toe footage, to the New York Times. In the exact same episode, we also said the full UFO disclosure would not come from the government, but would come most likely from private enterprises, while highlighting Bob Bigelow's logo. So the good intel regarding ETs are in the hands of the private sector, in the hands of government contractors, not in the hands of the major government agencies themselves, thus the lack of full disclosure. And then 2 months later, Bob Bigelow goes on 60 Minutes with Laura Logan and basically spills the beans on UFOs. I think our only paleontology episode, we talked about an ichthyosaur possibly being bigger than they actually are projected to be, perhaps even bigger than 100 feet, bigger than blue whales. And this is actually based on what we think to be possibly one of the biggest fossils ever discovered in Google Earth. If you have not checked it out, I'll put the image in the link right over here. This fossil, let's put it this way, our only paleontology episode so happened to be the paleontology story of the year, naming the exact fossil and the exact description of the fossil being bigger than it should be. So that was one of the surprise things that I wasn't expecting would be unveiled afterwards. Our main alien abduction episode, which we accidentally, and I really mean accidentally, premiered just a day before Australian Skies True was premiered in Secure Team. Well, we basically described the exact same thing that that documentary described. And we're talking about like alien hybrid female creature with little scraggly black hairs and big almond eyes. I mean, the descriptions were absolutely uncanny in its specificity. So I want to know, when this algorithm by DARPA rolls in, I want to know if they can actually make this channel seem like it's fake news when it so happens that we got a lot of things right.
They always seem to look like a bipedal primate. Well, if you think about it for just a second, that can't be. There is no way that aliens, if we ever do encounter them, are going to be bipedal primates, let alone look just like us except with some gnarly stuff on our forehead and maybe they speak English with an Indian accent.
Having studied psychology in depth, I can tell you that the most energy-consuming organ in our bodies is our brain. In fact, the brain takes up almost 25% of the total human body's circulatory needs, yet it only weighs 2% of the total body mass. Also, being upright, something that Mr. Shermer may or may not be aware of, is actually the most efficient way of allowing the blood to be both consumed and cooled at the same time by your brain. It's as if he has never heard of the concept of convergent evolution, that animals completely unrelated to each other, like a dolphin and a shark, can actually resemble each other if they are in similar environments. Now, I would expect that any biological unit living in a warm, mid-gravity, land-based environment that is at least as smart as us would likely have to be upright due to the basic circulatory needs, not to mention the needs of allowing our appendages to be free to create tools. So, Michael Shermer, what are you talking about? And it's not just us. It's all the channels that have already listed. Sticks, Axe, and Hammer has had an uncanny record of political predictions. We Are Change has been so right on the Epstein case and so many other issues. Press for Truth, I mean, what can I say about Dan Dix? You know, like, he's the man. Like, this guy really, really goes for the truth, for the sake of truth. And so that is the information warfare that is happening. That is my introduction episode. I'm going to be coming out with a lot more episodes very, very soon. I'm going to try to put in a few links if you guys have not seen this. I'm sorry if this episode sounded a little bit egotistical. Once again, I'm just trying to protect myself. Hey, Chloe, I know. We got to protect ourselves here, right? Got to protect ourselves. So if you guys don't believe that this channel is censored, even though Google claims to Congress that they don't censor anything, check out this analytics from a video called The Video YouTube Does Not Want You to Watch. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be coming out with a lot more episodes this week, so stay tuned. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out. So to me, I find that the evidence showcasing that denial once ran from east to west wasn't just from one historian. It was from multiple ancient historians.
We should ask ourselves if the old legends stating that the Nile River once ran from west to east have merit.
All the sites from Atlantis to Egypt had very similar traits. As if to say, this entire desert region at one point was one culture.
And the implications of this are enormous because undoubtedly ancient humans would have lived and migrated along these networks of rivers that enveloped much of the Sahara, just as ancient Egyptians did so along the Nile River.